Hold on. Cut the music. Cut the music. That's enough. No more 20-second intro as of right now for this episode, today's episode. And you know what? If I decide many future episodes to come, because you know what? This New England Patriots team almost put me in cardiac arrest today, and even though they won, and they're 500 right now as of week 2, September 14th, 2025, I'm not very happy. I'm just kidding. I'm happy that the New England Patriots won today. Guys, there are a lot of things that we have to get into. This is mainly going to be a New England Patriots show. This is episode number 17 of Ginormous. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's having a great rest of your day. And I hope everyone is rested and, kind of digesting what we witnessed at the 1 o'clock hour today. The New England Patriots versus the Miami Dolphins. The New England Patriots came out victorious. They're now 1-1 on the season. And you know what? There are a lot of things. It's very easy to focus on the negative things in football and the negative things on your team, and especially me coming from a coach's perspective, somebody who has been in the sport of football all the time and really dedicated their half of a decade to it. It really is easy to look at it from a critical standpoint and be like, oh, well, they won, but you know what? There are a lot of positive things to also take away from this game. And while I am going to be a little bit critical of the team with their game today, obviously they were not perfect. They were far from it, and there were a lot of close calls. There were also a lot of things that you could see, and they're going to be building blocks. So I would really like to talk about those things today, because again, not the perfect effort by any means. Definitely not a team we want to be in the nail biter at the end of the day, but we have to start somewhere, and I'd much rather be critical and complimentary of a team after a victory rather than a loss. A lot of things feel better even if things didn't go right or perfect or far from perfect after a victory. So without further ado, let's get into it. Once again, hope everyone's having a fantastic day. So, first thing of note, if we're going to start on the negative side, because I want to end on a positive note with this show, let's start a little bit on the negative side. I think even though at the end of the game, the defensive line came through, did their job, and really put their money where their mouth is, we've put a lot of money up in that front seven. I think at the beginning of the game, they really got shut down by a makeshift offensive line, including one player in particular who was making their first career start. Now, I'm not trying to discredit the offensive line or the offensive lineman. I don't want to be disrespectful to any one particular player. It's very hard. I have a particular affinity for the offensive lineman, and I think that their job is the hardest job in the sport of football. But at the end of the day, with the money that we invested up front for this New England Patriots team, with Barmore, Harold Landry, Milton Williams, K'Lavon Chaisson, and it is K'Lavon for anybody who thinks it's pronounced Clavon. I think we took a lot of time, and a little too much time, to be completely honest with you, to truly make our presence felt up front. That's something that I really think that we need to work on in the coming weeks, coming months. And I think that the emphasis really needs to be up front. You need to set the tone early and often. I understand that Miami is a very unique offense, a very different kind of offense than pretty much what the whole rest of the league is used to seeing. Mike McDaniel comes from that Kyle Shanahan tree, but Kyle Shanahan doesn't run anything nearly as exotic as what Mike McDaniel does. He really is in a league of his own, and I'm not saying a league of his own is a good thing. He's just a league of his own in regards to the X's and O's and specifically what he calls in the schematics. He has so many motions that are borderline penalties. One was a penalty, as number 6, Whittington, I believe his name is, Malik Washington, was going in motion forward towards the line of scrimmage during the play. They got a call. They walk that fine line all the time, and personally, it's not my taste. I don't like it. I don't think that being faster than somebody and being outgurued or outguruing somebody is really the best thing. I think it comes down to toughness, effort, and playing complementary football. I think that truly is one of the best ways to go about it. And I just don't think that Mike McDaniel's scheme is something that will ever lend itself to championship winning football. Sooner or later, if not sooner, I think the Miami Dolphins will or have are starting to figure it out. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about the Patriots today. Yeah, I think that the defensive line really needs to establish themselves more up front early on and consistently. I get it, it's Miami, it's hot weather. It takes a little bit of a time period to get used to, especially when you're used to the New England weather. Obviously, it's hot in the summer, but it's cold in the winter, so it's kind of hot and cold. Miami, it's kind of like that year round. So I do understand. I do want to give a little bit of leeway because New England is not the only team that struggles with going down to Miami and playing in that atmosphere. They're definitely not the first team, but they are a division rival. They are a division opponent. So even though there are some new faces, there should be some familiarity with it, and there should be some expectations going into it that, hey, look, this is how it's going to be. Maybe, we should condition ourselves properly. Maybe we should do this game accordingly. But again, look, it came through at the end, but I would like to see a little bit more impact up front in the beginning. Now, I've heard over the radio, 98.5 The Sports Hub specifically in the post-game shows, complaining about Robert Spillane's game today. And look, it's not going to look pretty when you look at the film. Robert Spillane, no, did not have a very good game today. But I don't think it has anything to do with Robert Spillane, the player himself. I believe that Robert Spillane is a good player, somebody who could plug and play on any defense, make an impact, make his presence felt. And I really do like him. I think he's a tremendous run stopper. I think he has some athleticism to his name, but he's obviously not the most athletic human being in the world. And again, I just do not think that this was a good fit in terms of opponents for him. I think that obviously last week he had a better game than he did this week. Like I said, Mike McDaniel is not somebody who is going to run a conventional offense. The Miami Dolphins have one of the fastest, if not the fastest, offense in the NFL. And I just think, unfortunately, this was kind of a mismatch for him. And the Patriots, when they put Marte Mapu in at the end of the game, even though he had that atrocious missed tackle and Devon Achane luckily stepped out of bounds, or else that would have been a back-breaking touchdown for the Patriots. But Marte Mapu obviously does have more speed, more athleticism. He is more of that hybrid linebacker safety that Bill Belichick kind of liked, but he does have that speed to them. And when we put him in over Robert Spillane, the Dolphins did not make the necessary adjustments, and they seemed to struggle with that late. I think that was an excellent late-game adjustment by the New England Patriots. Zachary Kerr, I believe, is the interim defensive coordinator's name. I think it took him a while, but I don't necessarily blame him. Robert Spillane is somebody who you don't want to take out if you don't have to. First of all, you're paying him a decent chunk of change, and second of all, he's a leader on the defense. You don't want to take him out unless it's absolutely necessary. And again, credit to Kerr, he did it. He put in Marte Mapu, which does take some guts in my opinion. This was somebody who was not even spoken about and potentially at one point was a cut candidate before the 53-man roster even came out. And, even though he had that horrendous missed tackle, he made an interception that really turned the tides of the game. So there was that. And I think that the defense overall is really going to need Christian Gonzalez to come back sooner rather than later. I know that they have the Pittsburgh Steelers next week who focus a lot on heavy personnel, especially with Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator, who in my opinion is the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL. Hello, Bob Toner, how are you? I think that the New England Patriots on defense, I think they have a lot of work to do, but I also do not think it is as bad as some people are making it out to be. I just think that Robert Spillane didn't have the best strength in this matchup against the Miami Dolphins, and I think that he is going to struggle, hello Bob Toner, once again, and I think he's going to struggle anytime he faces those really big barn burner speedsters like the Miami Dolphins with Jalen Waddle, with Tyreek Hill, and with Devon Achane. I just do not think that that's his game, and I think if he's going to be somebody who's a leader of your defense, ideally that's not what you want. Ideally you want someone better, and he's more of a complementary piece, but that's where we are right now. You know what I mean? That's what we have in terms of X's and O's. This team was stripped down to the studs, and we're building it back up. Right now we're just trying to build our foundation, and I think we're doing a solid job. And at the end of the day, look, the secondary, Alex Austin, I think is a good player. Craig Woodson, fourth round pick out of Cal. I think that he's a good player. But right now, we're asking a lot out of Craig Woodson. I don't think that he's been bad. I think that he's been a little bit up and down, in my opinion. He's, like I said, a fourth rounder, a day three pick, and a rookie out there going up against one of the most hypnotizing room of wide receivers in the NFL. And look, I'm not going to say he didn't hold his own, but I think that there's definitely a little bit to work on in regards to Craig Woodson as well. Alex Austin, I think, is a good third corner, but I think asking him to be that number two outside guy is a little bit above his weight class. I think that once Christian Gonzalez comes back, he's going to be a lot better. He's going to be more comfortable in his role. And right now, I just think we're a little bit understaffed. Christian Gonzalez, if not the best player on the team, is a top three player on this Patriots team, and we are badly missing him. I didn't anticipate needing him that much last week. I didn't think that he was going to play a huge role, or his loss was going to play a significant role in our loss to the Raiders, but, fair enough, it did. And especially this week, even though there were some problems in Miami, they're having players-only meetings after week one, you cannot ignore that talent that's on the field when you face off against it. If you underestimate them, they can get you. And they almost did. So I think that the Patriots do have a lot to work on. I don't necessarily think that Carlton Davis at this point is a strong number one corner. I think that he didn't have as bad of a game this week as he did last week against the Raiders. But once again, I do think that his best spot is being that number two corner. And I think, once again, we're asking him to do a little bit too much. And through no fault of his own, through no fault of this coaching staff, ideally, once again, you're going to want to have Christian Gonzalez. But I just don't think that everything right now is into place. And I think that's kind of showing on the field defensively. And I do believe once we get, again, potentially, arguably our best player on the field back, a lot of things are going to look different for this defense, and in a positive way. Last year, Christian Gonzalez was the lone, arguably the lone bright spot on this team, and I only expect him to get better once he comes back. So I think that this defense does need a little bit of time and does need a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But up front, look, if we can perform for every week like we did at the end of this game, I think we're going to be okay. But we're definitely going to need to show that impact a lot earlier than we have in the past. So just going into some of the positives, first of all, great game from Rhamondre Stevenson. He's always due for at least one of these types of Monsters games every year. Last year it was week 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals where we used and abused him, but you know what? We used him to get a victory, an upset victory. And this week it was week 2. He had a magnificent catch on the wheel route. He's a decent swing pass, screen catcher, somebody who, in my opinion, is underrated in the passing game. But that wheel route on third down where he used his hands, extended himself, and ran for 50-plus yards, I didn't know Rhamondre Stevenson had that in him. And I've said this in the past, and this is just a personal opinion of mine. I think Rhamondre Stevenson is a supremely talented running back. He's had the fumbling issues, which really hasn't allowed that take of mine to be kind of proven right. Not necessarily that I have to be proven right about everything, but I do think that Rhamondre Stevenson does have a lot of talent, and when he doesn't have those fumbling issues, is worth the contract that he's being paid. And I think today he showed you why. The Patriots definitely put a lot of emphasis on their running game this week. They were a lot more effective in it. They had a lot more moving the chains with it. And you know what? I think that even though TreVeyon Henderson didn't necessarily play a role in this game, or that big of a role in this game, I think that as a rookie, easing him in and kind of mimicking how they did it at Ohio State, where it was him and Quinshawn Judkins, like Quinshawn being the power back and TreVeyon being kind of that speed back, the thunder and lightning, I think eventually that duo is really going to lend itself well in something that can really highlight everyone's best interests and everyone's best talents. So Antonio Gibson played a huge role in this game. Obviously, when Malik Washington had that punt return, immediately Antonio Gibson came back with that kick return touchdown. That was excellent. That was outstanding. It really pulsated life back into our veins, and that's exactly what we needed. And he also held his own in the running game. He had a lot of strong runs, had a lot of effort, and again, Antonio Gibson, I would argue he's a little bit underpaid. Like we gave him a decent contract last year, one that was a little team friendly, but a little him friendly as well. We necessarily didn't think Antonio Gibson was going to get a multi-year contract, and I think that was a rare win by Elliot Wolf. I think that he's a great player all around, and you're kind of seeing. I don't want to call anything vintage Patriots because I don't think anyone's going to be or anything is going to be what it was in our prime golden era days. But you're seeing the Rex Burkhead, Damian Harris, and James White. This is kind of what you're seeing, like that trio of running backs that McDaniels likes to use, where you don't necessarily have to go crazy on the X's and O's. You just have to prepare for different playing styles. And because Ramondre Stevenson, even though he is all around, a lot of people would consider him, including myself, more of that powerful back. I believe Antonio Gibson is a good runner between the tackles and a good all-around player on special teams, on receiving, and on rushing. I think that he is your all-around player. And TreVeyon Henderson's your home run hitter. He has that game-changing, game-breaking speed that I think eventually in time will really lend itself to being the number one back on this team. And you know what? I think that when you kind of put it that way, if you have those three running backs, then again, you don't have to be a guru, a scheme guru, and draw up the fanciest plays. You just have to make sure you remain consistent in your blocking, and that's it. So, perfect segue. I want to talk about the offensive line. Now, of course, up front, there are a lot of penalties that we need to clean up. Will Campbell, Jared Wilson, false starts and holding penalties. But at the end of the day, I do not think that this offensive line, in terms of just purely blocking, is getting the credit it deserves. Last year, the offensive line, and the year before that, these past 2 years, the offensive line was such a sore spot, stuck out like a sore thumb, and really prohibited the Patriots offense from doing anything that they wanted to do and truly executing their game plan. And I think that this year, although imperfect, obviously we're very young up front, especially on the left side, I think that we've done a pretty good job. Doug Marrone, somebody who, in my opinion, is overqualified for that position, has really coached them up well. Hopefully Morgan Moses is doing okay. There were reports that he was coming out of the locker room with a walking boot. Hopefully that's just precautionary. Hopefully that doesn't lead to any extended period of time missed, because I'm not so sure that a 7th round pick, Marcus Bryant, even though I think he has potential, he was dubbed as a project, I'm not necessarily sure he will be ready to fill in those shoes that Morgan Moses can currently hold down right now. Maybe in the future, but right now, I'm not so sure about that. Again, up front, I think in terms of just purely blocking, I think we're doing a good job. There was one in particular on that Drake May rushing touchdown. I think that Will Campbell took the wrong man. He let a free rusher. Unless it was schemed up that way, it looked like Will Campbell kind of just blocked the guy in front of him, let Matthew Judon run free, which led to Drake May having to run in. And look, granted, it was a touchdown, so a lot of people aren't really going to look into it that much. But I do think that that's something, when you look on film and you look at the game, that's something that needs to be improved upon. I do believe that one particular play by Will Campbell was a missed assignment. But if you're looking at it, and if you're starting to notice something in what I'm saying and what a lot of people are saying, if you listen to any other podcast or radio hosts, Will Campbell has not really gotten badly beaten on any play. Look, he may lose some reps. He's a rookie. He's undersized in terms of his arm length. I understand that that was a huge concern. And all of those things might be true, but has anything that you've heard from anybody in terms of like the physical concerns, specifically the arm length in Will Campbell, has any of that really shown itself into a poor light? Has any of that really become a problem in these 2 games? Look, it's week 2, and I understand you don't necessarily want to overreact, and it's only 2 games. There are 17 of these, and potentially the playoffs. I don't know if that's the case with this team, but potentially. Do you really think that those things so far have come to the limelight? Because I don't think so. Right now, what we're talking about with Will Campbell is a missed assignment and penalties. Things that I would argue, if you're talking about a rookie, unless you have an absolute masterclass of a rookie, this Frankenstein-like prospect, I really don't think that there's been a lot to complain about. I think that those things that we're talking about, those are things that any and all rookies are going to struggle on as they adjust themselves to life and a career in the NFL. I do not believe that from a physical standpoint, Will Campbell has been poor. I do not think that Jared Wilson has been poor. I think that on the clean plays where they don't do anything badly, I think that they've done pretty well for themselves. Now, they're rookies. They're going to have games where they look like rookies. They're going to have reps where they look like it. They're going to get beat at some point in time this year. It is going to happen. And I think the sooner we mentally prepare ourselves for that, the better. But guess what? I'm not I'm not disappointed with what I've seen so far. I am actually far from disappointed with what I've seen so far from the New England Patriots up front. Garrett Bradbury was a big concern. I think even though he had that really bad snap, which almost caused a massive turnover in the game, I think Garrett Bradbury's been better than advertised. Excuse me. I think Michael Wenu has been good, and honestly, I think Morgan Moses more than anything, even though he had penalties today, 3 false starts in particular, I think Morgan Moses has been outstanding. You know, especially last week, Max Crosby, he really didn't make that much of an impact. I think that he's been outstanding. Jalen Phillips is no scrub. Chop Robinson, they don't really have a true standout on the defensive line yet for Miami, but they have a lot of young guys with potential who do have the potential to make plays and be kind of game wreckers. They do have a lot of guys up front who are capable of making plays, who are young and have juice, and I think Morgan Moses once again did an outstanding job today, and I don't think that he's getting a lot of credit. If you realize we haven't really been talking a lot negatively about the offensive line, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. It is because these guys, when they are playing clean, are doing a good job. So that's really what I have to say about the O-line. I would like to get to one more thing, and that is Drake Maye. Now, last week, Drake Maye obviously did not have the best of games. I did not think that from a plus standpoint of just me and observing, he played horrible. I do not think that it was Nathan Peterman level bad, but obviously a lot of things that need to be cleaned up, I think more psychologically than anything. And you know what? To his credit, this week, he looked a lot more poised. He sat there, he made the plays that he needed to make, and guess what? He led the team to the victory. And on Conti and Nick months ago, I was talking with Will about how I didn't necessarily want to see eye-popping stats off the stat sheet from Drake Maye. I just wanted to see consistent level of play. I wanted to see him making the plays that was necessary to winning football. And to his credit, he did it. He did it. Obviously there were mistakes. There are things that he could improve on if you really break down the film. There are obviously things that, okay, I would have liked him to do a little bit differently here. I only saw today from Drake Maye one throw that I felt that was inaccurate. Other than that, every other time I saw Drake Maye, it seemed as though he was doing the right thing and making the winning play. And you got to give him credit for that. You do. You have to give him credit. I said last week, I think that Drake Maye has a lot to improve on. I was expecting a little bit better of an effort. And to be honest with you, what I was expecting last week from Drake Maye is what he showed this week. And if this is going to be the starting point, obviously there are no guarantees, but if this is going to be the starting point of the improvement arc of Drake Maye, I think he picked a great spot to do it. And quite frankly, I could not be more impressed with what I saw from him. It doesn't need to be sexy. It doesn't need to be an ESPN top 10, SportsCenter top 10. It just needs to show up in the win column. And you know what? It did. He made the necessary adjustments. He did it. And I could not be more proud of him. His throws looked like he had touch on them. His throws looked accurate. He looked poised in the pocket. He only took off when he felt as though he needed to, as opposed to he felt ants in his pants and then he's just like, oh, I gotta get out of here. No, he did a fantastic job today, and I'd like to give him all the credit in the world. And for that, here's to hoping that only improves and goes up in week 3. It's a very tough matchup. The Pittsburgh Steelers are always going to be a pain in the behind, but I really hope that Drake Maye shows that poise and continues to improve upon what I felt was a really good week 2 out of Drake Maye. And last but not least, I'd like to give a minute or two on just Mike Vrabel and the overall effort that I felt from the New England Patriots today. Now, look, again, it wasn't perfect. There were a lot of things that were frustrating. The heart rate went up, and we all know that at any point in time in that game, things could have gone wrong. The ball could have bounced Miami's way, and we could easily be 0-2. So let's not forget that there are still some things that we really need to change, or else when we face better teams than Miami, we're not going to win. Plain and simple. But at the end of the day, we fought. Patriots are notorious for struggling down in Miami. It was the first time they won in Miami this decade, and it was the first time in 3 years, just about, that they scored 30 points. This team had fight today. This team had grit today. And even if it wasn't pretty, they put forth the necessary effort. They never, even if they got tired in that 90-degree heat, they never showed an ounce of quit. They always did something that was going to make sure that they did not lose that game. Even though they were playing on the defensive a little bit, you know what? You got to start somewhere. And in my opinion, this level of effort, this level of fight is kind of a win that shows Mike Vrabel's culture and shows Mike Vrabel's message is kind of the right thing. This is the type of win that will make kind of an inferior team, which I do believe right now the Patriots are, kind of buy in and say, oh, okay, maybe if we do put forth that effort, if we do go as hard as we can all day, every day, then you know what? Maybe a lot of these wins will become easier over time, and it won't have to be a nail biter at the end against Miami. We can go toe to toe with these teams as long as we give effort. And Mike Vrabel, was really scrutinized for, kind of having an easy training camp, for not really showing like the team had that much fight in week 1 against Raiders. But you know what? This week, I think the message that Mike Vrabel has been trying to set forth for his team really came to fruition. And look, it's going to need to happen again next week. We all know the type of effort that Mike Tomlin teams put forth, so we're going to have that, I honestly think, cranked up a notch. The same effort that we had this week, I think we're going to need to go even harder next week, and Mike Vrabel knows that, and I think the Patriots know that, but we're going to need to see it translate onto the field. And you know what? That's really what I have for you today. I'm really proud of this team. Like I said, my blood pressure was through the roof. I was at the edge of my seat, kind of leaning forward like a guy trying to lock in at a video game at a crucial time. That was pretty much me all game long. And you know what? It's a love-hate relationship, but you know what? At the end of the day, I will always love the Patriots. They're always going to be my favorite team. And you know what? I'm proud of them. I'm really proud of them for putting forth this effort and pulling out this win. So that's really all I have for you guys today. I hope everyone's having a good night. It was a good weekend of football. Those damn Badgers lost, but you know what? Their run defense is legit. Their run defense is legit. When you outrush Alabama, that's a good thing. But once again, I would like to thank everybody for listening. Thank everybody for your support. Like, share, subscribe. Always follow on the Instagram. That's where we have most of our active content. That is where we are going to be the most interactive with fans. And everyone, like I said, have a good rest of your night, and go Pats.